Hi, everybody. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today in our video, which is an interview with the Associate Director of OCY, specifically in Youth Ministry, John MacMullen himself. So he's a great mentor and teacher of mine in Youth Ministry, and I think that the interview is really, really good. So you should listen to it as much as you can, especially if you're thinking about doing anything in ministry in the future. You should definitely give it a listen. But there's going to be more of these types of videos on the channel that I have planned for the upcoming weeks before my baby comes. So stay tuned for those and watch the other videos. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. Hello. Thank you, Mr. John MacMullen, for coming on the Daily Mass Review, the YouTube channel for my teens. We're going to talk ministry. We're going to talk about John Mac, which I know he hates to do. He doesn't like talking about himself.
Good point.
He's too humble for his own good sometimes. And we're going to do that. You describe yourself to me, I guess, like how you got into ministry and your path that it took you to get here. And then we'll go from there.
Oh, dude. Okay, so you want the path to get to ministry. Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh. The directors at Mount Alverno saw me running this volunteer program and said, hey, have you ever thought about maybe doing stuff in the ministry capacity, like in a paid way? And I'm like, no, I never did. So they actually got me on. And we ended up moving to Orangeville, where I live now with my wife. And at the time, we just had like our.
So you weren't living there at that time? You moved to Orangeville
No,
for the
I was
job?
actually living in Toronto, moved to Orangeville. Here's the
Okay.
interesting. Okay, actually had an opportunity to go to a high school, which I did work at for about 6 months on a probationary basis. I worked at a high school chaplaincy in Trenton, and my family lived in that area. We could have bought a home, had the whole work 5 days, take the weekend off, take the summer off, blah, 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 blah. And they offered me that job around the same time as Mount Alverno offered me this retreat job.
Right.
And I was like, okay, all the money is there. If I move to Orangeville, I know nobody, and we're going to have to rent. There's no benefits. It's
Which is ironic now because you know everyone in Orangeville, but at that time you didn't know anyone.
It's true. Well, there's true. But we're talking how we got there, right? So my wife and I literally, which is a whole other story, like took off for a weekend at a bed and breakfast of all places, prayed about it, discerned about it. We just felt, you know what, even though it makes sense financially to make more money, better quote unquote job, be able to buy a home, go take this chaplaincy position at a school board, or go to this place where, okay, I'm going to have to rent, going to have to work weekends. There's nothing. But God was clearly placing in our heart to go the opposite way, which our family's like, what are you doing? That makes no sense. But we just think God's telling us to go to Orangeville. So we moved there, started working at the retreat center. And while I started working there, doing full-time retreat work for schools and some churches, the pastor at the church at the time saw what I was doing. Because now we were part of the parish as well. I said, hey, you want to do a little bit of youth ministry on the side? I'm like, I guess so. Okay, sure.
Okay.
And confirmation. So I started working 8 to 10 hours on the side.
So at that time, what would you say what did the term youth ministry mean then?
What did I want it to mean, James? That's
That's what it meant.
That's kind of what it meant. It was okay. Give you a case in point. Now I'm going to say like I'm really dating myself, but when we did that, which is around 2001, so you're looking like 20 years ago, for me to find another youth minister who was being paid or compensated to do his youth ministry, I had to drive to Walkerton. And Walkerton. In fact, no, I lied. I refused to drive 2.5 hours to get to Walkerton. So that youth minister, Sam Zettel, and I would drive an hour and a half to meet halfway.
Halfway, yeah.
Like in some little like four-cornered town off of Highway 9 somewhere, like,
Right.
Where they had a coffee shop and a general store, to talk and say, well, what are you doing as a youth minister? This is what I'm doing. Well, what are you doing? I'm doing this. Well, I'm doing that. That's what we did.
Yeah.
That youth ministry became part-time, and then he said it started to grow. And then my pastor said, do you want more time? I said, sure. But then he got to a point at 15 hours a week. He says, can you do more? I'm like, no, I can't. I have a full-time job at Mount Alverno. And then when he said, well, what do you think about coming on full-time and working for us here? Prayed about it, said yes. And then that becomes a whole other chapter. But that's how we got started because you asked me. So there, boom.
Yeah. Great.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's how God works, man.
How would you say that you were able to tell when God was calling you to make all these decisions? Because there was a lot of like decisions in between there where you sat down and you prayed, right? And I feel like we talk about all the time of like, I sat down and I prayed about it and then I did it. but you tell a teen today to sit down and pray about something, it'll last about 5 minutes, right? So how would you say
Yeah.
that you were able to tell what God was asking you to do when you were
Yeah.
praying about it?
Man, what I'd say, James, I mean, to preface that, you guys, if you guys have a chance to watch this, if you're really thinking about ministry, um, you really, you have to really strive to have peaceful, quiet time, um, and stillness to
Hmm.
authentically create an atmosphere of prayer. And I don't envy the culture that we live in for a younger generation, because I get it, like with the music and the distraction and the screens and so forth. Maybe nowadays you want to get away from the screens a bit more. I get that
Hmm.
too. Um, but when my wife and I, like, we went away like for a weekend, we did the whole thing. We drew up the pros and the cons. We wrote about it, and we wrote things down, and it clearly said, like, by the worldly standards, like, this makes a whole lot of sense. There is a point I have to say, like, do you want to have the question I think I would ask is, like, do you want to have a meaningful life? Because if you want to you want to go get rich, you want to go be wealthy, if you want to kind of be in constantly in the runs of, okay, am I successful by worldly standards? Tons of options to do that. Still going to take you through the roller coaster. But for me, it's like, you know what? I say, okay, God, like, where are you leading me that would have the most peace? Moving to Orangeville, where I knew nobody, didn't seem to be peaceful. But the fact of the matter is, I could look at all the worldly stuff and the other opportunity to kind of go work in the school board, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that that wasn't becoming any more attractive to me made me have to realize, you know what, I'm just really going to trust God with this. So it's not like if you get into ministry that, like, okay, now
Hmm.
you're in forever, like you can't get
Yeah.
out, like,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
it's not like that. Um, but it's something to say, guys, you pray, you look at, okay, what is going to bring me peace? What is going to bring me meaning?
Hmm.
Because I did not want to just have a job where I could go and I could work and I could just make money, but if I didn't enjoy it or I didn't feel passionate about it, and serving God and seeing other people come to encounter God in a way that it's changed my life, like, I wanted to share that. I wanted to give other people that same kind of opportunity. And
Yeah.
youth ministry, man, I mean, it was huge for me growing up. I just want to give that same opportunity to others.
Yeah. I think I see a lot now with teens, especially with the family pressure that they're being told to wait. Like, okay, you want to go do ministry, you want to go mission work, do all these other responsible things first, and
Yeah.
then go do it. Right. And I kind of don't like that saying anymore, where like good things come to those who wait, because I feel like it just doesn't aptly define what it means to really discern spending your life on what God wants you to spend it on. I much prefer people who, like, good things come to those who trust in God, because I feel like with how I've experienced it and how you're describing it, that's like the main thing, right? Where God wanted to bring you those good things, but he required you to trust in him, which can be scary, of course.
James, the best. Yeah, you're right. And there's people who are like, are you really doing what's good for your family and things?
Mhm.
And yet, if I could say, and again, okay, so I'm showing my age here, but I've been in Orangeville for 20 years. Um, and what I have gone through, and giving people an understanding. I mean, like, I've had a child. We've lost a child 2017 after 4 months. Had a son who battled cancer last year. Um, Lived in Mount Sinai, going through chemotherapy, touch and go last year. My daughter just came home from knee surgery yesterday. Like, I've had like 4 kids in the last 3 years living in downtown Toronto hospitals.
Mm.
And my faith community is what has sustained us and has looked after us. Like, now if you told me 20 years ago, yeah, I might have had the money, whatever, and so forth, but I would never have had the contacts. I would never have had the families, I would just never have had the opportunity that we have in the youth ministry world, as an example, to
Yeah.
have this breadth of relationships up and down the life of the church
Yeah.
to support us through these hardest times.
Yeah.
So it's really easy. What you say is true. It's like, you want to say, okay, yeah, those who wait, you can keep waiting for those good things. Or you could, try to see those good things start to happen now. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like God says, well, only good things are going to happen. Like, trust me now. Like, I like what you said, man. Like, trust me now.
Mhm.
Don't wait till you're wealthy, till you got all this money in your back pocket, because, once you start that game, you're never going to have enough. You're never going to
No.
hit a point where, oh, well, now maybe we have enough money that we can go do all that stuff. Who do you know is ever like that? I know lots of people have done the missionary part up front, but very few people later on, like, okay, well, now we're just going to kick back and.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, God asks you to do something now and you tell him I'll do it later. that's not exactly how he works, right?
Right. Once I get everything, and you got James, I mean, too, man.
Yeah,
Like I got married young, whatever. You did too, obviously. And there's some people like, well, I'll look at marriage when I'm got the full-time job and like I've got like the career is all set and I've got money and so forth. I'm like, the best thing you could have is an understanding of your vocation. And if
yeah,
it's there and it's in front of you, like are you saying that God's plan for your life vocationally isn't going to be enough? Like you've got to have all this worldly stuff too. It's not going to work.
yeah,
It's not going to work.
yeah, absolutely. Would you say that it's been difficult balancing working in ministry and having a family?
Yeah, great question. I get that a lot. I really do. And I'm not going to, I won't sugarcoat. Like there are times where it's hard. There's no question,
Mhm.
no question at all. But what I would say is that the blessings that come with that are huge. Um, I've got 5 kids now. My oldest is 21. My youngest is 13. The younger two are actively involved in Edge and like in their life team ministry at Holy Family, where I'm a core member at. My oldest, my grade 12 son who just graduated, is already connected with York University chaplaincy, which I know you're obviously familiar with. Chaplain, and he can't wait to be a part of that. He's been running like a rosary group online, like with like 60 other students on Saturday or Sunday nights. My daughter was taking a train while she was at college last year. She would be taking a train 45 minutes from her college in Belleville to get to Kingston to connect to the Newman Center just to find another faith community.
Yeah.
My kids experienced their faith that way because they saw how important faith was to like what their dad did and to what my wife is involved in. Um, it's hugely important. But hey, there are late nights. Sometimes you gotta be out there for the evenings. Gotta be there some weekends and so forth. But when you do youth ministry, you're able to provide an atmosphere that allows you, for me as a parent, it allowed me the opportunity to essentially help create a larger, I guess you could say, field of experiences for my own kids to have a ministry to grow up in. You know
Hmm.
what? So it was a win-win. It really was. What I would say though, and being very honest, is you don't get rich doing ministry. I think that's a dangerous mix anyway. I really don't. You can't be making a lot of money working for the church. Those two things are dangerous together. If you're willing to live within your means, you're fine. You're
Yeah.
really fine. But if you're always going to be longing for, I want more, I want the best, I want the newest, you're always going to have, you're going to feel dissatisfied.
Yeah.
I'm okay with what I got. I'm okay with living within our means. And when things happen along the way, we have enough to cover the things that we need. And from time to time, we get the things that we want. But we don't live by what we want. We live being thankful for what we need and getting it. And
Mhm.
so I go to sleep every night feeling pretty peaceable. And my family still loves me. So they don't think I'm a big failure because dad's not filthy rich. Like they recognize. Look, the truth is, last thing on this point, James, that we're going with our 5 kids, even right now upstairs, okay, like COVID safe, all that stuff. It's amazing how even though our house isn't air conditioned and we have like a fairly smaller house compared to some of the mansions that some of my kids' friends have, they end up in this house. They end up in this small little like duplex, you know, with a smaller yards and so forth because of the relationships, because of the culture and the dynamic of our family.
Yeah.
That their friends actually want to be here. One of my sons went to drop off something this morning in the front of the porch for a trip with my oldest son that they're going to go on. We ended up talking him and I for like an hour on the front porch because
Mhm.
he wants to be here.
Right.
They want to be here. So it's the kind of family, it's the kind of environment that you're fostering is more important than, you know, um, trying to kind of do it the worldly way.
So building on that then, what would you say, how has your family especially motivated you to be better in ministry? Like how have they inspired you, motivated you?
There's no hiding the reality that you need to practice what you preach. You know, there's always that concern for us as Catholics, I think, is that you can be called out as a fake or, oh yeah, well you say this, but then you do that.
Mhm.
Um, it's a lot. You're a lot more under the microscope and in a good way. I guess you've got to be on. You've got to be on almost all the time.
Mhm.
I have to be mindful of because if I'm going to tell my kids I'm willing to live for the church and work for the church, but then come home and not be that same person, then I'm now teaching and showing my kids that you can talk the talk, but you don't really have to walk the walk when you're at home. And you need to be authentic with your own kids and your family. You have to because if they don't see it, you're going to get exposed pretty fast, pretty quick.
Yeah. In ministry, you're literally
Yeah.
fighting to help bring Christ to, youth, right? How have you been able to cope with the stress of doing that every day? What are the best ways that you find to find peace amongst that battle that you go through on a daily basis?
Well, one of the things that I would say is, first off, is you have to believe in the mission of the church. But I really believe that, for salvation requires conversion. And for me, what kept me honest is that, like, I didn't just find ways to fill my day busy with doing programs and just kind of like push and plug activities for young people to be a part of. Like, I want to make sure they're saved. I want to make sure they knew Jesus and that they could go to him and allow the Holy Spirit to transform them so that I could spend eternity with them in heaven. That could be an eternity forever for everybody. That's the one, not all about me, obviously. So I think you have to recognize that. And I'd be all in on that mission for sure. And I think that needs to be an important part of any person who wants to work in youth ministry. You need to have that passion. When people just see you kind of just running programs and you're just going through the turnstile of stuff, you're not capturing anyone's imagination, and people have to really figure out, what are you really about?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have that passion. But at the same time, look, the truth is, I'm not saving souls. You're not saving souls. None of us are. I mean, God does the saving.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to be the one that makes all that actually happen. He might choose to use us as a conduit, and what a grace that is, undeserving as it may be, that God would choose us to be able to be vessels of grace to others. But I'm not saving anybody. So I got to be able to go to bed at night and think, you know what, reasonably, like, did I really do all that I could to help advance the kingdom of God today?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really important part. And I go back to part of John chapter 6. And you probably know, like, in the bread of life discourses, when Jesus goes through and talks all about, like, if you eat my bread, unless you
and then they leave.
And they leave. Exactly.
Yeah.
And what does Jesus do? He watches them go. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't chase after them and say, guys, you got this all wrong, whatever. So I'm thinking, if Jesus knew that he had to let them go, maybe it just wasn't their time for conversion. Maybe they were just, their hearts were against authentic conversion. I don't know. So I can't go to bed stressed about, oh my gosh, like, you know what, like, maybe I just should have worked even harder. Like, maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have, like, chased them all the way home or something. Like, you have to know, you got to work your hardest, give it your absolute best, but then really trust it. It's like, God, this is your ministry. This is your vineyard.
Yeah.
I just need to know in good conscience. I got to look at the end of the day, do my examination of conscience, and recognize, did I really do the best I could, and be okay with that.
Yeah. I noticed when I first came into ministry, I had all these ideals about all the things I was going to do and all the programs I was going to run. And I would be shocked sometimes where I go through a whole day of work and I wouldn't have stepped in the chapel once.
Oh yeah.
It really just made me think a lot about, are my days being directed towards God, or am I directing these youth towards myself? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely one of the biggest learning curves when you step into a ministry role, that, like, how do I put God before myself? How do I remind myself to do that? Because if you don't do that, at the end of the day, if something goes wrong and you go home, you're just not going to be able, like, because you're going to blame yourself for that. But if you know that you're directed your day towards God, you have to learn to let it go. It was definitely one of the things I had to learn very quickly. Otherwise, the stress of the job just gets to you.
Like, I know when I started at the OCY, that was one of the things I asked Father Frank, my boss, is like, look, can we pray together as a staff? And he was totally on board with it and things. But I also know there's been other staffs that I've worked with where there was just no interest. It's like, no, we don't need to do that. That's not what we're here to do. I'm like, how do you advance the kingdom of God?
Yeah.
If you don't invite God in at the front of the day, at the beginning of the day.
Yeah. And I think it's great. Every time I go down to OCY, you guys always stop for mass in the middle of the day at lunch, before your lunch break. Because remember, when we were training for a Totus Tuus missionary, we'd go and then I'd see all the OCY staff there with us at lunch for mass, which I thought, like, that's the way it should be done, right? How are you going to be able to build up the kingdom of God if you're not, being part of the kingdom of God? Yeah, and I think especially because we teach ourselves how to work, or there's almost no supervision for a lot of youth ministers. Like, you have to keep yourself accountable to that.
And that's why. And again, anyone who's thinking about youth ministry nowadays, like, I mean, I'm going to sound like the grandpa or whatever, but it's a lot easier now. Like, I mean, when the first number of youth ministers started the Toronto Archdiocese, we had what we call, like, our 242 meetings, which, James, like, where youth ministers get together. We would get in a car and drive 3 hours to London, like 3 or 4 of us to hang out with 3 or 4 other youth ministers in London,
Hmm.
and we would pray together. That's the first thing we do, is we get together and we would pray together. We make that part of that day or whatever. And we would invest in that. Now you have some people who are like, oh, like, if I have to go from like Thornhill to like
I know.
Markham, like
Yeah.
that's so far. Like, I don't know, do I want to go to a meeting? That's like 25 minutes away. I'm like, 25 minutes. That's amazing. I drove 3 hours. I used to drive 2 hours to get to another youth
Yeah.
ministry.
I remember we had a meeting, and this is when I wasn't able to drive places. We had a meeting in Scarborough, and I had to get there from I think it was York University. So it was like a 3-hour commute both ways. And I still went, right? And so then I told one of the youth ministers who was there, it's like, why did you come? It's like, what do you mean? Where else am I going to go to talk to other youth ministers? I have to go. Yeah, I think that's definitely true, that I guess a lot of us youngins out there don't appreciate how hard it was in the beginning.
I've even had priests who've come to me and says, John, I wish we as priests had what you as youth ministers have. Family of youth ministers where you can support each other, you stay connected, you share resources.
Yeah.
There's other areas of the church, they don't even have that.
No, yeah.
It's a blessing that you have. So if anyone who's coming into it, it's like, man, I don't know if I could do youth ministry. I don't know how to do it or whatever. There's so much more at your disposal to be able to give you the assistance to get you going than there would have been like 15, 20 years ago, for sure.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time who are thinking about going to youth ministry that there are lots of jobs in youth ministry for people who want to work, right? There's very few for people who don't. Yeah. And I know that with all of the jobs that I applied to in youth ministry, I was the least qualified candidate, but I always got hired because I came into those interviews saying, this is what I came to offer. This is who I am as a person. This is how hard I'm going to work. Right. And I think that pastors and just people in general who are looking to build up the kingdom of God are more likely to invest in the person who's going to push into it with all of themselves than somebody who has this long resume of all these things that they've done. Right. I think you just have to you have to be prepared to work very hard, but it's really fulfilling work, I find.
I'm with you. And when you know that you're there, because I've sat on so many committees, hiring committees for parishes. When a person comes in where you can look right away that like, look, they're just touching down here long enough until they can find somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those out there too.
Mm-hmm.
They've never done youth ministry at all. They haven't volunteered or anything. They come in, but because they've been part of the Rosary Apostolate, they think they're ready to do youth ministry. And God bless you for doing the Rosary Apostolate, but you don't know anything about youth ministry.
Yeah.
But people think, well, how hard can it be? Like, how difficult can it be to be a youth minister? I'm like, really? Like,
yeah.
Really, you want to ask that question?
If you're not committed or there for the right reasons, you generally don't last very long. And I think that's the main reason for the high turnover. Right?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's it. And again, there's some people, like you say, they're not in it to do youth ministry. They're in it to kind of get money while they go look for something else that they really want to do. They figure youth ministry is a safe way just to bide their time. And that's hard. That makes them
something else.
Yeah. That always makes it harder for the person after them to come in because you've kind of soured the taste of what a good youth ministry can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I've taken over for a lot of youth ministers that had that kind of attitude where I'm just looking for the next thing, right? And then I have to slot in there and try to build up a youth ministry with where this person wasn't really invested in the teens, right? They're invested in the work, but not the teens, and it's tough. And then sometimes you have the opposite problem where the youth minister is very invested in the teens, but then they didn't build any sort of like foundation for you to take over. And so when they leave, those relationships don't just transfer over like magic.
No, absolutely. And that's exactly why we do the meetings that we do. And again, James, you've been a part of it now for a while, but we do have that network of different kinds of gatherings. So like, we have what we call our foundations meetings we have monthly meetings for brand new youth ministers to help them get the foundations. Okay, what do we do to be successful? And then you go to year 2 and beyond, you're okay, I figured out the basics. Now, how do I do things better? What do I need to do to advance, to make it stronger, to make things grow, to make things more solid? And then, we have all the steps to kind of help support each other with that.
Yeah.
But you're right. Either extreme isn't really great either way. It shouldn't be all on you. But you also shouldn't be one sitting back just watching everyone do the work for you or hoping that someone else comes and does it.
Yeah, it's definitely hard work for sure. But it's the most fulfilling work that you can do if that's what you're called to.
Here's the thing again, I never planned. Can I play my parent card for a moment?
Play your parent card.
Let me play it. So my oldest son was obviously born before we actually got into full youth ministry. So, he's got his godparents. My daughter, second born, you look at her godparents were actually heavily influenced by youth ministry. In fact, her confirmation sponsor, actually my oldest son, his confirmation sponsor ended up being not a family member. My oldest son confirmation sponsor was a 17-year-old who was a leader for him in his high school youth ministry, who had volunteered in Edge. My daughter, same thing. It was an Edge leader from their parish youth ministry that she chose to be her confirmation sponsor. And for my fifth child, my son Caleb, his godmother was, again, one of the teenagers who used to be my first year that I did confirmation classes. Now, if you're going to tell me this kid that I did confirmation classes with, okay, that, as a 14-year-old kind of thing, became part of our first youth ministry, our parish, said, hey, that woman, that teenager is going to eventually become the godparent of one of your children, I would have been like, yeah, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's when God, when you see what God does and how God, reveals things over time. I mean, I've had teenagers who are a part of my youth ministry who asked me to be their best man at their wedding. Those are, you want to talk about blessings? I did not get into youth ministry thinking that like the God would use me in such a way to impact people's lives to the point where, I'd be asking them to become permanent parts of my family's life as a witness sacramentally, or that they would invite me to, play such a prestigious role, like in a wedding party. Like, that's what's different, that youth ministry is not just a job. Like those are things you're just like, wow, like God, what a gift it is, to be a part of to say that I get to do this every day, where people want to not just be part of their working lives or their school lives, but they want to be most intimately involved, like in their family life. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I can attest to that too. Like 3 or 4 tables at my wedding were just youth ministry people, right? Of course, the other like 15 tables were just the Sullivans, because that's just the way we Irish people do it. But that was very, like, my teens were there, right? And they were there with their families and they were partaking and
Yeah,
they were part of it, which I thought was a tremendous testimony to how much we can become, in our lives become intertwined, thanks to God being a part of the center of those relationships.
absolutely, man.
And
Absolutely.
even the two people who me and Sam asked to be godparents for our child, they were both former people who worked under me as missionaries at my last church.
No kidding. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
See, so you get it, man. You're drinking
I
from the
get it.
same Kool-Aid.
I am. There's no other Kool-Aid around. I don't have everywhere else to go for the Kool-Aid. What would you say are the biggest challenges right now in Toronto Archdiocese youth ministry?
The biggest challenge, I think, in youth ministry, one is, I kind of touched on it before, is like the need to be like a witness and authentic to what you're about. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you are not prepared to be authentic, if you are not prepared to be a witness to your faith and show how you live your life that same way, because the gospel is so countercultural nowadays, about how we're called to like live and respond to things in the world, and to be in the world but not to be of the world. It's really, really important that you're able to say it's possible and it's doable, because if you can't, we can't be asking them to do it. You really, you can't. Well, I guess you can, but you're a fraud.
Yeah.
Right. So if you really think that you want to lead other people to Christ and show them, how to commit to him in your daily living, you've got to do it 100%. I think the other challenge is not being so sterile. I'm going to say, like, I get there's some reasons why we need to have, like, safe ministry and so forth and things. But if you bubble wrap yourself so much where you're never vulnerable or whatever, that's also not authentic living. Like you said, for you to say that, hey, you've had teens at your wedding, whatever, and which I do from the Boys and Girls Club, which I worked at before I started working in youth ministry. Same thing. I had 2 teens of like high school teens from our drop-in center. These were really important people at that stage of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I had no qualms with that. And I'm still connected to those people today, right? Now that they're they're later in their as adults themselves. You have to be authentic. And you also have to be like, obviously don't be stupid, but you also can't live by preach faith, but then live by fear.
Mm-hmm.
You got to just be really careful that, you're not so living by fear that your faith looks like it's just a means to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I was listening to a homily by Father Mike Schmitz, and he was quoting "It's a Wonderful Life." I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's
I
my
have.
favorite. It's
Saw
my
that
favorite.
same homily.
It's my favorite movie of all time. It has to be. And at the beginning of the movie, they're describing what the problem is of the movie is that Joseph is having George is having a problem, and Clarence the angel says to Joseph, I'm presuming is another angel, Joseph, what's the problem? Is he sick? And he said, no, worse, discouraged. Right? It's worse than he's sick. He's discouraged. And I think for sure in ministry, if you're not willing to take any risks with what you're doing, you're never going to be able to make any meaningful difference or impact in the lives of the teens that you're working with. Right.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
100%.
And I remember at the beginning too, we were seeing like in youth ministries, like Isaac Jogues and Eric's as well up in Holy Family, that like these huge, big youth ministries. And then they came down to being the online format. Like they get like 3 or 4 teens during their office hours. And how difficult that is as a youth minister to sit there and be like, what did I do wrong? What shouldn't I done more? What can I do now? I remember when I was sitting here like working probably like 20 hours a week and getting paid for 35 in the pandemic, because what the heck can I do? I'm already doing youth night 3 nights a week, and saying, okay, I have to do something. I can't just sit here and accept that it's not going to get better. I have to try and do things to help it get better. Right.
Right on.
So yeah, it's definitely very hard. And I think this just kind of pandemic has pronounced that issues that youth ministers are having, where they have to take risks. They have to go and do something that may not work, invest the time in it, and it may flop completely, but you have to try something, right? Otherwise you're just not doing anything.
Yeah. People will give you, I think you'll get marks for trying, because everyone's like trying to figure out new stuff together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're not even trying, well, what are you doing? Like, I mean, I went to and again, I'm a volunteer, on Eric's team. And it was a couple of weeks ago where like, okay, I live in a different city, but I'm going to go to that city. And I went to Tim Hortons. I found out like my grade 11 small group that I work with, what's your favorite Tim Hortons snack? And I went to Tim Hortons and I did home-to-home delivery. Like I just knocked on the door, stepped away, whatever, came to the door. I remember when my grade 11 teens, who I hadn't been with in like 2.5 months, is like, it's just so weird to see you in real life. Like I did
the sweatshirt drop off a couple weeks ago. I was posting it on Instagram. I never post on Instagram. I'm not a social media person, contrary to everyone else in my generation. My wife actually runs the Instagram. That's why it looks so nice. I don't do it at all. I just tell her what we're talking about that night, and she makes this nice Instagram post. I'm like, great,
awesome.
But I actually did it that week, and I was like, wow, like I actually get to see my teens in person for the first time in 3 months, right? I think like when I went to go to see them, some of them were like tearing up. One of them wouldn't let me go. Like I was supposed to like spend like 15 minutes at each house and keep going, because I was trying to do it all in one night. And one of them just had me stay there for like 45 minutes. Every time I tried to leave, like the little siblings would come be like, okay, you have to race me. You have to show me where to find diamonds in the ground. It's like, okay, well, I mean, obviously that's more important than what I'm doing, clearly. Yeah, like it was a very good moment for me to remember what the point is of why we're doing all of this, right?
Yeah.
To keep going.
And I really believe that's not lost on people, like and that's been my thing, James, since this began, is like when all the different things that are out there. And again, I'm a coach too, right? Like I coach a couple of different sports. And when COVID-19 came down, everyone was canceling everything everywhere, including schools. Like, you know what? Schools are closed. Okay. Sports teams are shutting down. Workplaces are collapsing or shutting down, whatever, and so forth. I thought there is no one competing for their time. Like why? And this is a time for us to step up and to be there and to reach out and say, hey, we still want to spend time with you. And we're going to figure out ways to make it happen. And if you didn't take advantage of that, you probably did yourself more harm than good, I think.
Oh yeah. My old rusted down barbecue in the backyard has been working overtime this summer. We're socially distanced barbecues. So just, you stay over there. I'll cook you a burger and talk. Because that's how I try to meet with my leaders, because I don't want to meet with them over Zoom. It's just too much of a...
James, that's the way to do it. Man, why have we not had these conversations? When I would hire my teens to run the summer camp at my church.
Yeah.
It became a Friday staple that at the end of the day, because I lived like 3 blocks away from the church at the time.
Right.
Okay. Barbecue at my place on Friday, when a lot of other people are like, okay, good, my work is done, I'm gone, whatever. I'm like, no, I'm taking my work home in their smelly camp t-shirts that they've sweated like dogs in all day.
Mhm.
And I have a little kiddie pool because I only have little kids. I can't afford a big pool. So I have a little,
Yeah.
and I'd fill it up with water in the backyard, and everyone's like, hey, 2 teens at a time in my pool because it's all we could fit, and like
Yeah.
hang out, have the barbecue. And again, they were like, where else would we want to go? Like, and they knew that they were loved and they were cared for. They wasn't just, hey, you're my staff.
Mhm.
You know what? You are my younger brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm treating you.
Yeah. I find it always tremendous humbling whenever I'm spending time with my teens or my core that they're not coming for me, right? They're coming
Right.
for Jesus, and somehow through me they're getting this experience of Christ, which is like just incredibly humbling that we are capable of doing that at all, right? Even a little bit. So it's that
Dude, I'd be like, in spite of me, they're still getting
yes,
Jesus. I mean, that's
absolutely. Absolutely. Um yeah, because you still have to show up to do youth ministry and do all that stuff even on bad days, right? And
yep.
somehow Jesus finds ways to work through that because he's just so much better than we are at that.
You
At
got that
ministry.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
No kidding.
last thing,
Mm-hmm.
to wrap it up. If somebody out there is in the same position you were, where they have to make a choice between taking that job in the board, in the chaplaincy with the pay scale and the nice house and the summers off and all that stuff, and choosing to devote their life to ministry, and they feel like it's an impossible decision, what advice would you give them, or comfort you would give them about discerning a life in ministry?
Yeah, I know a lot of people who like they instinctively think, well, if I'm going to work with young people, I'm going to go the teacher route. I'm going to go like the school board route kind of thing. I'm going to go do that with all the perks and privileges that kind of go. Not that there aren't some hard days in working in schools too. There is,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the more normal thing. And so, look, if you want to take maybe the safer road, and I say safer by worldly standards of you're going to get paid more, you're going to get like all the union stuff that kind of goes with being part of like a teachers union, you're going to have your summers off, et cetera, weekends off. Okay, like what, there's nothing bad with that. I don't think God's going to like say like, oh no, like look what you did. Like I mean, he still can work through you and will bless you with your
Mm-hmm.
heart being open to serve in that way.
Yeah.
But not everyone, like not everybody can do the ministry thing. Like it really does require, I'm sorry, I can say it requires a skill set. It requires a little more difficult because you're not, because the exact reason you do not have, the moment you step into a youth ministry role, you don't have a union protection. You don't have like a pre-organized arrangement as to like, okay, where your hours are going to be, and someone's going to figure out what my classroom is going to look like for me and who's going to be coming to my classroom. You don't have to go try to get people to come to your class. Like that's all arranged.
Yeah.
It's a very special kind of person that God placed in their heart and says, you know what, like I want to use you to be a means so that people may encounter my son, Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Because we got to go get him. We have to earn the right to be heard.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to earn that right is that we listen to them first and we show that we care about who they are. And not everyone's got the patience for that. Not everyone's got the confidence for that. And none of us come out as experts, as James, as like none of us are experts. Yeah, I'm an expert in that. I'll totally go do that. I've been rejected more times I could shake a stick at. And that's okay. I mean, Jesus was rejected. I better be rejected.
I was going to say, yeah, Jesus has been rejected more times.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I love that. And again, look, when people say, oh, I want to follow Jesus, like, and be a minister, it's like, are you sure? You sure you want to follow Jesus? And he's like, yeah, why wouldn't I? I'm like, well, part of that step takes you up on a cross.
Yeah.
You're going to suffer in youth ministry. You're going to have teens who disappoint you, who hurt you, maybe even betray you. But like, well, that's great company because that's just like Jesus Christ. But if you're really thinking that, you just want to do right by God, you really want to make serving the Lord part of your daily life, and you're willing to invest in it and do what needs to be done to make that happen, it's better than you can hope for. Like, the joys that you're going to receive from the experience are they're life changing. Final quick story. Well, I had a heart situation years ago, and I still don't know what it was, but I really was not almost able to breathe. And I had to get taken to the hospital. You know who I called at 2:30 in the morning to come pick me up and take me to the hospital? Was a Corps member. One of my volunteers, came 2:30 in the morning, picked me up, drove me right to the hospital. And as I was going unconscious with the gas thing on, my eyes are opening and closing, there's my friend Terry looking at me beside me. That wasn't my wife. She was home with the kids. You know, it wasn't anybody else. It was one of my it was a volunteer on my youth ministry team who was there, what I thought was maybe be my last moment on earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who would have ever thought that when I started as a youth minister, that if anything like that was ever going to happen, trust God, trust that if God's calling you to youth ministry, don't be afraid to give it a shot, to give it a try. Really, you're not going to be I know anyone who's ever said they wish they didn't get into youth ministry.
Yes, that is true. Even people who have left
Yep,
would
exactly.
say that they needed that for whatever they were going to do next, right? Because we have people who go the other way too, who become teachers and chaplains.
Yep.
Right?
And they become huge advocates. And it's no lie. In my school board, Dufferin Peel, Catholic School Board, literally for chaplaincies, they're literally targeting youth ministers now. It's almost like the schools have started to figure out a little bit that, you know what, like these people might have all the academia to be in the role, but they don't know youth ministry. And we need what youth ministers have. We need the elements of what youth ministers have to be more alive in our schools, because they're missing and they're suffering not having that.
Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, well, I think, man, if my sense is from what we're looking at is, hey, if people are really thinking about becoming a youth minister, there are so many youth ministers. I know, James, you've been great for that. You've been terrific. Never to be afraid to go ask. What we used to do, and it threw everything off this year, but usually every 2 years, we actually have what we call like a retreat day for people discerning youth ministers, or youth ministry, pardon me, where we bring youth ministers together. And we almost have like a Q&A day, like, you know, and ask, give it and open up. It's like, you want to talk about family finances? You want to talk about family impact? You want to talk about the joys, the challenges, like, you know, the pros, the cons. We have those days from time to time for people who are really thinking about youth ministry. We don't have that right now because of what's going on with the COVID situation. However, if anybody wants to really think about it, and James, if you want, you know, obviously I say James is a great guy to talk to about that. He's got enough experience that he could give you like a really good answer on that. But I don't know one youth minister, and I know a lot. I know like over 100 some youth ministers. I can't think of one who would turn down the opportunity to sit down with somebody who has honest questions about it, and not give them the time of day to kind of answer their questions and get more information about it.
I also think that a lot of youth ministers would gladly have a teen or a young adult who's thinking about youth ministry come and work with them, right? Do a day in youth ministry. Come with me to the schools. Come with me to do this, right? See what it's actually like.
Hey, I had two co-op students when I was a youth minister in Orangeville. I had 2 co-op students actually work with me, you know, from high school, to see what that's like. And one of them did go on to become a full-time youth minister, and it's probably one of the best ones I know, but that sounds biased because I said that. But anyway.
Yeah.
But thanks, man. Thanks for giving me a chance to be here. And if anyone made it all the way through this, like, you know, God bless you for listening to me talk. I wouldn't have listened to myself talk this long. I'll tell you that right now. But
I would
appreciated.
And did. So
yeah,
there you go.
You had to.
I chose to be here. I had free will to be here. I chose.
Well, if anyone's watching this who's also part of your ministry, James, please make sure you tell this guy, like, you know, what a great job he's doing and how thankful you are that James is your youth minister, because there's some people who would love to have him, guys. So appreciate this guy that you've got, especially like his facial hair. Like, it's like,
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I know for sure the wife.
Dude, I'm just trying for hair.
Well, you know what? That's fine. I know I'm not gonna be bald because I have the psoriasis up there.
Oh.
You know, you pick your battle. I get the nice hair for as long as I live, but I also have permanent dandruff. I'm not Canadian. It just snows all the time up there. Just steer into the stereotype.
I just choose this to help me run faster, be aerodynamic.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yes, of course. That's what they always used to say whenever I was a kid. We'd buzz the hair off. Like, hey, that's wind resistance. You can do it, James. Do that. You got to shave some seconds off your time. Great.
Oh, my Lanta. You are too good. Well, thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on, for giving me the time. I appreciate it. You keep up the amazing work. And for everyone else who's out there who's watching, thanks for being a part of what you're doing, guys, and being part of this ministry. And happy that you're thinking about where God is moving you anyway. It's awesome.
Watch the other stuff.
And watch the other stuff.
Look, there's going to be cards right here with the other stuff.
Oh.
Because YouTube's so advanced like that. They just do it automatically for me. Yeah, look at that. Okay, goodbye.
All right, man. Peace. God bless.